We are failing our struggling readers. The purpose of this lecture is to use storytelling and data to help us understand how and why we're failing our struggling readers and describe some steps that we should take. Now, it uses stories. Stories have always been used to carry greater truths. They invite people to connect with their own experiences. And stories explore the craggy corners where straight line splaining can't go. And they invite us to use our emotional and intuitive senses as well as our logical brain to understand. I'm going to read an excerpt of one of the stories. This is called Robert. A review of Robert's individualized education programs, IEPs, indicated that for 5 years he'd been given the same district-mandated, for-profit, one-size-fits-all standardized reading instruction program given to all struggling readers in the district. In each of his 5 years, he was sent off to a little room during reading instruction to work with a special education teacher. The special education teacher was required to implement the district-mandated, for-profit, one-size-fits-all standardized reading instruction program with fidelity. This means the teacher read the directions and mindlessly followed the teaching recipe like an animatronic robot at Disneyland. But that's not really an individualized education program. It's a standardized education program. Robert received the same standardized reading slop administered in the same way and in the same sequence as every other human being subjected to the same for-profit, one-size-fits-all standardized reading instruction program. So in essence, some person or group of people who had never met Robert, who had never listened to him read, who knew nothing about him or his situation, made all the decisions about his reading instruction. Makes perfect sense. Yes? No! This presentation will address 3 interconnected areas. You see them there. My data sources, you see them there. It's in the proposal, and it will include stories of real people. You see them there. I won't go through all of these. Maybe I can get 3 or 4 in this presentation. We will see. Eric for sure, Robert for sure. Here's the problem. Pow! 2.4 million students classified with learning disabilities receiving special ed services. Up to 80% have some sort of reading disability. There's a disproportionate number of students of color in the special ed system, so they are disproportionately affected by failed reading instruction. With the same special education label slapped on them, students of color are more apt to be sent to segregated settings versus inclusive settings. And in these segregated settings, it has been shown that students have lower learning outcomes than those same students in inclusive classrooms, and reading achievement is not accelerated. Now, this year is important. From 2002 to 2019, students with disabilities, there were no statistically significant changes in their low reading scores. This is NAEP data. You see it right there. Grade 4, 2002, all the way to 2019. Grade 8, 2002, 2019. No significant changes. And Grade 12, 2002, 2019. No significant difference from here to here. All right? So, there are real people behind these numbers, just like Robert and Eric. Clearly, what we're doing is not working. Much of this comes because people don't understand how the brain creates meaning with print. This is probably the most significant contributor to educational malpractice. There are 2 main models. We'll look at each. The phonological processing model, otherwise known as the simple view of reading, is prevalent in the special ed system. Here, reading is simply thought to be sounding out words. You see the words on the page, you sound them out, and that information goes up into your cortex. That is a simple view of reading. According to this model, reading is simply sounding out words, so struggling readers have sounding out word deficits. So they need more sounding out word instructions so they can be good sounder outers. Of course, you say. The result, however, students get marginally better at sounding out words in isolation, as we would expect in the short term, but there's little transfer of these skills to authentic reading situations. They learn it here, but they're not able to use it there, and there's no significant improvement in their ability to create meaning with print. And that's what reading is, creating meaning. If you have no meaning, you have no reading comprehension. Now, the neurocognitive model, or psycholinguistic, this is prevalent outside the special education system. This is a more accurate view. We'll go through this. This is based on research in a wide variety of areas, not just in a single area, and you see them there. Here, reading is creating meaning with print. The reader uses what's in his or her head to make sense with what's on the page. Neuroscience has shown that there's almost 10 times more information flowing from the cortex down than from the thalamus up. That means we're using what's in our head to understand, to make sense of it. There are 3 cueing systems. The simple view said, well, it's just the phonological cueing system. You sound out words, of course. This model says, yes, you sound out words, but you also use syntax, which is grammar in word order, and semantics, which is meaning context clues. These 3 work together to cue the brain as to what the word might be when they see it on the page. And I'll demonstrate each of these in the presentation. Eye movement is interesting, and I'll demonstrate that. We fixate on only about 60% of the words. More the content words, the big words, than the simple words, function words, the, in, an. Okay? And we can only perceive things we fixate on, no perceptions. So during reading, we're not perceiving individual letters. We're not perceiving every word. Our brain is filling in the blanks. And I'll be showing eye movement research and how the eye moves. It does not move in a straight line from left to right. As we think, the brain is tricking us. Our eye makes little hummingbird movements over the page. Misunderstanding research in the social sciences. The Science and Education Reform Act of 2002 was significant in educational malpractice. Simple view of reading, simple understanding of research in the social sciences. This act said, and it's in the special ed system, said that controlled experimental research is the only method that can be used to determine causal relationships in education, that one thing causes another. And this is mandated by the Council for Exceptional Children, that's the main special ed body, and the U.S. Department of Education. They stuck their nose into reading research. What do they know about reading? They said the same methods used to study bacteria in the confines of a petri dish are the only methods that can be used for studying children in a classroom. Controlled variables? Not so much. Human beings are not standardized products. Now, controlled experimental research is a valuable tool. However, its exclusive use, as mandated by these, become problematic. It creates a peephole through which to view reality. It does not include the real stories of real people to help us understand. A view of reality that's distorted. For example, and I'll tell the story of Sally. I read her research. I had the numbers, but then I talked with her father. And I got an understanding completely different from the numbers. And I got a sense of what I should do completely different from the numbers. So this presentation will describe and demonstrate some of these basic elements of controlled experimental research. The audience needs to know what that is, the difference between collecting data and research, how it's misused, and the basic elements of qualitative research, including stories and surveys and ethnographies. And then hope to get to effective reading instruction versus educational malpractice. And The CEC, Standards Council for Exceptional Children, has this thing called high leverage practice. And if you review the research of this, you look at this organization is misinterpreting and misusing research. They select those things that show that direct instruction of low-level skills results in more learning of these low-level skills. So it's a direct instruction. They are trying to leverage students to manipulate them to producing predetermined outcomes. So the cause-effect relationships that you see in this controlled experimental research is converted into stimulus response instructional techniques. Essentially, they've taken a Humpty Dumpty approach, where they take the complex act of reading, break it into little parts, and they try to teach reading by putting all the little parts back together again. It doesn't work. And in doing so, they ignore a vast array of pedagogical strategies and meaning-based approaches that are outside of the special ed world. That's a brief overview of the presentation that I will be doing.